the act of just being alive can be incredibly beautiful, right? Literally like walking down the hall, you can be, and you know, I don't want to oversell it, but you truly can be just filled with joy.
Are you listening?
This is the Rob Scott Show.
Damn.
I mean, really, like if we're not trying to change the world, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Rob Scott Show. How are you, Sarah?
I'm good. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
It's been a little bit. We're getting back at it, and I love it. All right. What did we want to talk about today?
Yeah, so today I think it would be awesome if we kind of talked about awareness and focus and how people can really benefit from being overall happier if they are able to kind of master that at a different level.
Yeah, and I think for people, like awareness doesn't make sense yet, right? It's more like just people that want to be happier, right? Is it possible to be happier than we are sustainably in some way that's real? Is there a shift that can be made in happiness that can make us genuinely happier? And I think it's funny because it's almost what we're looking for all the time, right? Like that's pretty consistently either to feel less pain, not hurt as much, right? Or feel more joy, more happiness, or taste something delicious. Like we're always in that search. And then what I find is when I start to talk to people about like, well, you can be happier, sustainably happier in a really meaningful way, you watch them like not be as interested, right? And I think we like the quick fix. We don't want to do any work to get there kind of thing. So like, what's the fastest path, right? That's sustainable.
Right. Well, and kind of just to like back up, I mean, a lot of people maybe don't even know how to be happy. And so when we say things like sustainably happy, that sounds like work.
Right.
And we often are kind of just, there's so much messaging in society to do the quick, fast kind of patch over thing. And so I think that kind of there's a general sense of how do I be happy?
Yeah.
Like I don't even know how. And if I don't even know how, it seems like, so far away. So it's just kind of like, kind of unveiling kind of the solution to how to even be happier in a real way. I think people will start to see that you can get that like sustainable joy. It's just a matter of like which paths do you go down. And I don't know if we want to spend a little bit of time talking about like all the different ways that we're supposed, all the different things that are offered up to us that are supposed to quote unquote make us happy. You know what I mean?
Well, I would love it. Yeah, actually, let's go into like the blueprint. I think that we have a blueprint issue on happiness. But before that, you're reminding me that I just recently saw a psychologist online talking about this, and I'm sad that I don't remember. I don't even think I took the person's name into my consciousness. But she was sharing that a mark of depression is this belief that you can't be better, right? That there's no solution to it. That if you fall into depression, I hate talking in absolute, so you may experience depression and not have this, that's fine. But I think it's probably pretty accurate that for the most part, people end up feeling as though there's just no solution. There's no solution that exists. And if you even were to convince them that there is some solution for it, they then take on, well, it wouldn't work for me, right? So I wonder if, and if anybody's listening to this and is sitting there going, well, I couldn't be happier. And if you're feeling that because you're extremely happy, that's fantastic. Good for you. But if you're feeling that because you're not happy and you don't believe that you can be happier, I really want you to open to challenging that, because that's absolutely step one is opening to, I can be happier than this. And maybe we take a second and talk about what we mean by happier too. Because
I was just going to say, I mean, truthfully, even the happiest people can be happier, right? Happiness is kind of like infinite and kind of also, it usually fosters more of all the other things that you want versus like taking your attention and energy and all that. Like the ability to be happier in any of the things you're doing usually helps everything else reach another level. So I would also challenge the person who says that they are the happiest they could be.
I love it. I think that's great. That's a great point. Yeah. And when we say happy, I don't mean eternally blissful. I don't mean endlessly laughing. I don't mean that you never get mad or sad or upset. But maybe fulfilled is a different way to talk about it too, where you can really be connected to, maybe defaulting to optimism instead of pessimism, maybe defaulting to, this can be better and I know how to work on it. Maybe having real access to what I hope we talk a lot about is our attention and understanding how much our attention and where our focus is at play in our state experience in a big way. So, let's invite the attitude of, I can certainly be happier. And let's kind of look at some of the hacks and some of the ways that we've come up with or that we've distilled from others that really work to get us there,
Yeah. And kind of like a thought that I was having when you were saying that as maybe an epiphany is there's probably a nuanced difference between being happy, right? Being content, fulfilled, happy, joyful, peaceful, optimistic, all those things. Yeah. And like a literal state change. And I think because most of us would say we're not great at, keeping a happy state kind of steady.
Yeah.
I think, at least for me, I think of happiness as that state change, that jump from feeling like not good to good. But that's not, that's maybe fleeting happiness or instant happiness or temporary happiness that like, I feel here and now I feel here, like for whatever reason. And I think what we're talking about is once you get here, like how do you kind of stay here, right? Yeah. So how do you get that ability to like hop from, apathetic, depressed, unsatisfied to happy, but then like, that kind of blissful, like, yay, that's that state change. But then once you're there, like, how do you ride that and really like be with that? And I think that's kind of the little nuanced difference between, when we say like quick fix or instant happiness or bliss, like that, it's less of a state change, more of a way of being, right?
Yeah, it is a way of being for sure. And it's very much, there's a shift involved also. I say this all the time, my company's name is Fundamental Shift. There's a fundamental shift in a way of being that can invite an easier way of running your brain, quite honestly. And if you run your brain differently, your emotions trickle down from that, like your emotional state becomes much more manageable. So let's go through, I think a lot of people think that, the blueprint that I'm worried about is that people think happiness is outside themselves. And I think a main shift in the blueprint that I want to start explaining and sharing with people is that happiness is sourced from the inside, that nobody else is responsible for it, that you're not going to find it in another person or in a drug or in anything else. Now that all comes with the caveat of like, heroin does make you happier in the moment. Right? A chocolate cake can make you happier in the moment. Making a lot more money can make you happier in the moment. But there's a fall off after quite often where it's not sustainable. It doesn't lead to a persistent state of being happier. And the difference is that if you're trying to source like, I'm not happy now, I need something outside myself to become happier, you go get that. It seems to work in the moment. And this is why we end up believing in that, because you know what, that chocolate cake did make me happy yesterday. But what wisdom looks like is when you start to see that entire roller coaster of happiness, right? That chocolate cake led to, the insulin spike, the happiness, the dopamine, the whatever the response is. And then all those get out of balance the other way. And you might feel depressed or lethargic or actually a little sick or whatever that stuff is. And so that total experience probably at least averages out, but in often cases it actually, averages to lower than you were feeling, prior to doing that thing. And so, what is it to switch this blueprint into, wait, I can source this myself. And what we find is if we do that, a lot of other processes start to get multiplied to become better on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. And just, I don't know, kind of just grind back into this idea, heroin, sugar, alcohol, seeing your friends. Again, I think of that as like it's ways to change your state, but it's the same as like, if you dress a dog up in a cat's costume, it might look like a cat, but it underneath you're still a dog. So it's just like, changing your state, having the capability to change your state from one thing to another is not the same as saying I'm happy person underneath. And I think,
well, let me challenge that. Let me challenge that, because to some degree, what I'm saying is that you having the infinite ability to do that on your own is a way to actually become happier. Whereas if it's dependent on something outside yourself, you're going to then find yourself, tending toward addiction or searching for it, or you're not going to really own that you have access to happiness, right?
Yeah, no, like 100%. And that's just kind of to say back to the people who would say like, well, I am happy because I just saw my friends and that's something that's like really makes me happy. But it's like, you're still sourcing that joy. Like you're choosing to be happy with your friends. There's people that hang out with their friends and they're absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
There's people that drink and they're like blissful. And there's people that drink that are totally like angry and upset. So, just to think like, I guess just to really agree with what you're saying and kind of just say it differently is that there really is this kind of internal source of where this is coming from in any moment, whether the factors around you are supposed to make you happy or not, or are like chemically changing your state or not, or any of that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think, brain chemistry is a big part of this, right? There is a biological level of what's happening, and that brain chemistry leads to how we end up feeling in our body and what our body gives off hormonally and all that stuff. And so this is why things like antidepressants in certain circumstances can really work, because if you're out of balance chemically, we can bring you back into balance. This is why if you're addicted to something, detoxing, getting to zero may not feel happy, but it's really the only path to any sustainable rebalancing of your system in any way, right? I think, let's talk about attention for a second, right? Let's talk about the fact that your consciousness is made up of your attention, period, full stop, right? Like what you're conscious of in any moment is what you're giving your attention to. And our attention ends up in some cases just wildly scattered all over the place. If you've had that experience of you've got your email open, you've got Facebook Messenger open, you've got Twitter open, you're over on Instagram, and you're shopping on Amazon, and you've got work to do, and your taxes are late, and there's all this stuff, and your mind is just bouncing back and forth. There's that experience of being completely overwhelmed and lost. Those things are all external. Let's just make it internal, right? How about, the fact that we don't really know what we're going to be thinking 1 minute from now, and that we really, to a great degree, don't have much natural agency to stop our mind from kind of running all over the place. And so if we get into anxiety or depression, as an example, they're often expressions of like deep rumination about something, right? Like we'll get stuck on a thought that just feels horrible or is scary or is overwhelming or saddening, and we almost can't get off it, right? So in those cases, our attention gets captured either in a scattering or a flittering, where it's, overwhelming in a sense where it's in all these places, which is exhausting. And I would say almost always ultimately leads to unhappiness in some sense. Or it could get stuck somewhere and really be in a space that's just causing quite a bit of unhappiness because of where our attention is. And what I don't think people realize is how incredibly powerful just moving your attention can be, right? And if we do every move that we're doing in all those external ways to be happy, like to go have a drink or to go see a movie or to go do whatever, is doing that. It's changing our attention, right? It's changing our focus and what we're up to. It then may change us chemically, et cetera. But quite literally, just changing your attention, if you source that, if you learn how to source that, that actually changes your brain chemistry as well. Because if you're taking in, horrible, depressing news, like if you're just watching the news 24/7, right, you're going to be getting triggered to be afraid, to be angry, to be activated in all these ways. That neuronal situation of how your brain is firing is going to be kicking off chemicals that are creating a certain brain state and ultimately a certain emotional state in your situation. The ability to not just ride that because we feel like there's no other way we could be, like, obviously I have to watch the news. Obviously this is the most important thing. If I don't pay attention, then I'm not being mindful of our world, and that's the worst, right? These base level beliefs, which maybe we'll get into beliefs later, and end up leaving us with our attention kind of captured in a way that's leading us to some form of subtle or, really overt misery and suffering in a way. And so, the shortcut out of this is quite literally to move your attention, right? And as you do that, if you know how to do that and you move it artfully and well, you can all of a sudden start to really master your own state experience. So while I'm with friends, I can make sure that my attention is staying with the friends and I'm staying happy. When I leave my friends, I may all of a sudden miss them and think, oh, I wish I had more of that. But instead, I could actually move my attention to something that keeps me actually happy even without my friends, right? Or I could move my attention to things that keep sourcing feeling amazing, right? So my point is that our attention is driving, wherever our focus is driving our state to an enormous degree. And a lot of our life is unconsciously trying to manage that, but we don't know that that's necessarily the thing that we're trying to manage.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's like, just to sum it up in one sentence, like attention matters.
Yeah.
Because you're saying that's the hack to kind of ending misery. And I think that it sounds, okay, we just move our attention, right? And it sounds so simple. And if we just stay there for a second and think about, the awareness of where your attention is kind of the first step to being able to change it. We are so captivated. Like, we live in a world where most people are so captivated by things that we don't have the ability to be aware of what is stealing our attention all the time.
Right.
Whether that's, the what's on the radio or what's playing in the background, whether that's what, notifications that ding on your phone. It's the billboards that you're driving past. It's
an overly negative partner or friend who just is giving us a narrative
right.
Or parents that are just constantly.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So the ability to change where your attention is great. Sometimes we don't know where even to put it. So like, even if we had it, it's like, well, where do I go? I mean, there's a million other things that are going to suck my attention the minute I shift from work to school to home to friends to, the internet to TV. Like it's almost like, it's so difficult in with all the external things to kind of even have the awareness of where my attention is, like right now, like where's my attention right in this moment, and then B, like to shift it away from like the things that are miserable, but not to like shift it into something else that makes me miserable.
Correct.
Right. Cause then I'm just in this cycle of like shifting my attention to misery. And that's like a little bit more challenging than it sounds like sometimes.
Yeah. And
there's some strategies that you can deploy to kind of help you.
Yeah.
through that.
And full disclosure, like we just created a process, right? Which is really, it's called Hacking Happy, and it's really about developing that skill, right? That understanding. Another layer of this that I'd like to explain to people is, your attention can be on an event, it could be on your friends, it could be on that drink you want, it could be on all these things. All of these things are external. It could also be in your thoughts, right? It could just be in a thought or a rumination, like you're remembering something or you're dreadful of something coming up in the future, right? Those would be in like the thinking realm, but they could also be in your body, right? I could invite whoever's listening now to like move your attention to what your left foot feels like, right? Or what one deep breath in feels like. And literally there are these shortcut moves, right? We have our Back to Breath program, right? Where we're training people to learn to get out of the chaos in the moment, to drop whatever's going on, to come back to breath, just as one place you could bring it, which is at least neutral. If you start to hang out with your breath, you may actually notice that it can be really beautiful, but that may not make sense until you do it a little bit, right? But it's neutral. It's like you can get out of anxious by bringing your focus back to your breath, in a sense. Now, without practice or without having any idea really how to do that, you do it in a moment, in an instant, and it actually will work in an instant, but immediately your brain goes right back because it's untrained and or it remains scattered. It goes like, oh, but I haven't checked my email yet. Or, this kind of incessant thinking kind of comes over us, right? So like harnessing attention out of thought and into the reality around you, like what's really going on. Quite often we're like, the sky is falling, but we're sitting comfortably in a home with nothing wrong really in the moment at all, but we're dreading what we're thinking about, right? And so,
I mean, wouldn't you, that is, I think we've talked about this in past episodes. I mean, that is like the human condition.
It is the human
condition. We're constantly worried, we're not going to have enough money. We're not going to, the sky is falling, all this is, and nothing's happened.
Yeah.
And now we're in a state of like total depression, anxiety, overwhelm, and we're
not doing anything about it, right? So that thinking, that quality of thought, I'm not throwing that out the window. It's super important. And if you think of something and it's like, oh, I've got to do that, and then you do it, or you literally plan to do it, or, there's an action there, that's all incredibly useful. And so we want to be able to do some of that. But notice how often, maybe 20, if you're awake 16 hours in a day or whatever, 15 of those 16 hours, That's not what's happening. What's happening instead is this delusion of just dread or overwhelm or whatever. Gosh, I hope 15 hours of people's lives isn't that horrible, but quite often it can be. And, even if it's 2 hours of your day that you're spending just really overwhelmed and kind of hating this, like right before bed and right after you wake up, and then the day kind of captures you and you get caught up in it, and that's fine. Less of that leads to space for more natural balance and joy, right? And presence and happiness and, dare I say enlightenment, to some degree, right? If we can start to escape that trap of the mind, that trap of suffering, we can start to do this. So again, we end up talking about a lot of things. I really want people to kind of grab that attention is a place. It's a place that your mind goes. It could be in the past. It could be in the future. It could be in thought, right? Or it could be in your body. It could be in sensation. And there's a real difference there between thought and sensation, right? There's a real unfolding of coming into sensation where you can really dive into being present, which is this escape out of like, how do I stop thinking? How do I stop that ruminating mind? How do I stop that scattered brain? Well, one place you could put your attention is into the physical experience, again, of your left foot or your hand or your breathing, right? To become present. That might not sound exciting, but if you're lost in depression or anxiety, or maybe they're not clinically at that level, but you're just unhappy, that starts to give you real agency to move away from it. But let me back up a second. So even with these skills, I've been through, actually in my lifetime, multiple difficult breakups where things have been hard and overwhelming. And sometimes relationships can be the most challenging space that we're in. I very consciously, and knowing a whole lot about my brain in one of my breakups years ago, consciously for maybe a few weeks was like, I'm going to watch a movie, right? Like there's all this drama going on. I don't want my attention to be in that drama. There's no more decisions to make about it. It's just painful. I'm going to watch a dumb movie, right? And so I'm not saying happiness is found in the bottom of all the movies, right? But in that moment, I was managing my attention over to a story or something that could capture me to literally get me through time, right? That was just more comfortable than just being in the drama or whatever. So I was still living with a person and we hadn't worked it out. And I was like, look, I'm not going to go into the continual debate and the continual pain of this. You're invited to watch the movie with me, or I'm going to go alone or whatever, because that's how I need to pass this time as we get through this stuff, right? So moving your attention even to, doesn't have to be to your breath. It can be to a movie, or it can be to a book, or it can be to something else. But step one is almost that awareness of like, where is my attention, right? Am I hanging out in the drama? Am I hanging out in a really sick news cycle? Am I hanging out in rumination of a past breakup and I'm just, miserable about it, right? So if you are, then where can you move your attention that's going to be the source of a different experience for your consciousness, if you will, right?
Right. Yeah, no, yeah. Definitely. Maybe we can continue through, a couple of the steps, because I was thinking like, if you kind of break this whole idea. So if you start with the idea of like, I'm not happy, I want to be happy, how do I get happy? And then you look, and then you bring in this concept of like awareness, attention is a place, and you can move it around, right? Yes. Then there's these little like steps within it. So maybe the first one, to your point, is, do I know where my attention is? Like, am I somebody, and this always makes, there's this level video, you can find it on Rob's YouTube channel. It's called The 4 Levels of Consciousness. And it's kind of the 4 different levels of awareness that you can have, but even, and which we use in our Back to Breath course, but it's really good in this kind of context for wanting to feel happy too. And I think that's why it's such a confusing message where everyone says, oh, this will make you happy, doing this will make you happy, this diet, this shirt, this app, this whatever, this TV show. And I was thinking about it when you're giving that example of a breakup in the movie. You're like, I wanted to watch a movie. I'm not saying happiness is in movies, but again, kind of going all the way back to something we said at the very beginning. If you know that happiness is sourced from inside you, inside what your mind is doing, then you can use the tools that are available to you at your best discretion to either change your state or change the way that you feel. So for example, movies, if I'm depressed and every day, instead of going, and I don't have a job, every day I sit and watch Netflix, it's probably not the best use of time. Correct. If I'm feeling anxious and I know I'm in a relationship and I'm working through things and I need a minute to like bring my state out of, depression, chaos, overwhelm, a comedy is like spending an hour and a half watching a comedy, changing my state, changing where my attention is, moving my focus. Like that's very valuable. But then to say, hey, this movie or this whatever, this is a strategy to happiness is kind of ridiculous, right? Like we have to be able to kind of hone the skill of moving our attention so that we can kind of trust ourselves to use the tools available. But like looking at it in the step, like definitely step one, I think is, what is it? Unaware, but you can say these better than me, but
yeah, for sure. So unaware is, and these are specifically broken out about like your relationship to your thinking. It's sort of thinking all the time and completely unaware that you're thinking all the time, right? So this is somebody who's just probably not interested in personal development at all. They don't know that there's any different way to be. If I were to look at them, I might think it's a lot of crazy going on, right? It's a very opinionated person. It's somebody who's, yelling at stuff. And, I have some people in mind that I don't need to call out that just kind of express this way, right? I wouldn't say they're necessarily happy. They may report that they're happy or whatever, but I would know that there's a different way to express happiness than that. But that's just thinking all the time, not even knowing that it's happening, and you're just unaware, right? The next level would be you're thinking all the time. You know that you don't want to be thinking all the time, right? You're like, man, I ruminate a lot. I can't stop my mind. All this is going on. So there's another step. You're at least aware of it, but you have no idea how to change it, right? You're like, how do I stop thinking? What's this other way of being? What is calm and peaceful and happy? And what is that? Because I'm not that, my normal expression, right? So that's at least one level up because there's a beginning of an awareness there. Level 3, the next level would be you're really starting to gain some mastery of like, oh, I know how to move my attention around. I've got some of these tools, but it's fairly effort filled still at times, right? But it's happening more and more and you're getting real benefit, right? That alone, if we could just get humanity to there, that would be a phenomenal achievement, right? That's amazing. And then level 4 is where this really takes on an autopilot, where it becomes kind of absurd to be lost in thought. It just doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't take the effort. You don't have to practice meditation or whatever. Like it just becomes your way of being, right? Would be a level 4. And, I like that as like thinking about our relationship to thought, because so much of this is managing our thought / managing our attention, right? Like where our attention is.
Yeah. I was just going to say our kind of, personal development nerd debate is like, we know that thoughts affects feelings and feelings affect thoughts. And so I love that that's a map of thoughts. And to me, like, I almost want to superimpose like feelings, right? Mm-hmm. So like, it fits because if your thinking affects how you feel and your feeling affects how you think, right? Like that first level, someone who's just like, I am unhappy. I don't know why. I know I'm unhappy. There's, the sky is falling type person. And there's just like no management. The next person is like,
there's no way to be happy at that point.
Right. There's no way to be happy.
And this is life. This is life. Yeah.
This is life. And then it's like level 2 is like, hey, I know there's a way, but it's probably not for me. Some people can do it. Like there's kind of the next level.
Or there's probably awareness. A hope that it's for you, but you really just don't know how.
Don't know how.
Right?
Don't know how.
Exactly. I don't know how. Yeah.
And then level 3 is that person, maybe in the breakup who's like, I'm going to take a minute and watch a movie, right? They're like, I'm not happy, but I know there's things that I can do immediately to kind of change it. And then the level 4 person is like the person who loses their job, gets an offender bender, comes home and, they have 2 sick kids and like, I don't know, mailman didn't deliver their Amazon package. Yeah. And they're still like, you know what? Today's a good day. Right. And they have that kind of inner source of happiness or vice versa. Maybe they're like, maybe it's both thinking and feeling, the 4 levels of both.
It is.
Because they do really relate, but like we've talked about a lot in the realm of thought and awareness, but there's also kind of this exactly the same, I think, amount of importance around awareness and feeling.
Totally. That's a great point. And I think also that level 4 and level 3 expresses this quite a bit. Every step can be beautiful, right? We think that we need the concert or the really funny moment or the drug or the whatever to have these peak experiences. And that's where the fun is. A lot of entrepreneurs, especially when they're starting out, are sure that when they make all the money, right, then they'll be there, then they'll get there. Right. And a lot of what I'm trying to share with everybody is there is no there. There's no such thing, right? We're in a process, and where we are, we're always here. And so where we really want to get to is here, in a way that we love ourselves, we're proud of ourselves. Yes, in that process, there's going to be tons of things to do over time, but our experience is always grounded in this moment. So claim happiness now, right? Claim these things, even though there's work to do and you've got all the problems and all those things are happening. Can you still step into creating an experience for yourself with the mastery of your own attention into being truly happy? And when you do that, the act of just being alive can be incredibly beautiful, right? Literally, like walking down the hall, you can be, and you know, I don't want to oversell it, but you truly can be just filled with joy, right? You can be filled with excitement and joy and all these wonderful things. It's a real fast path back to being filled with depression and sadness and overwhelm if you let that thinking machine run,
right?
Or if you begin to ruminate about things and really get stuck into the feelings of sadness, et cetera. So I just want to be a stand for that. This kind of ownership of happiness is possible. You can absolutely get there. And there's nowhere there to get. It's actually here. It's kind of in you. It's like unearthing it. And it's not a time thing that it takes to get to. Now, habituating it and getting to level 4 probably takes time, right? To reshift your system. But the immediate change, just like taking a glass of wine will immediately change your state, or arguably, you know, as close to immediate as we can get there. So will change your focus in the moment. It may not be the hit that the wine gives you right away, so you may not notice how much nicer it is, and your mind may be trained or habituated to pop right back to the disaster mentality so quickly that you don't honor that just moving your attention to something else really is a beautiful thing. I love when people are like, you know, I'm always unhappy. And I'll say, really, are you always unhappy? And they're like, I'm always unhappy. So you've never had a happy moment? I've never had a happy moment. And it starts to become absurd when you really think about that, because later in that call, I'll make it a point to make sure that I get them to laugh or something. I'm like, oh my God, you don't look unhappy now. What happened? Well, okay. I'm not always unhappy. Like, right. We're not always unhappy. We're not always anything. We shift in and out of all these things. And so, you know, stay open for that possibility for yourself that you can shift and become happy in the moment, right?
Yeah, and I think kind of if I could sum up a tangible tip for our listeners of this episode, if you can master the awareness of where your attention is and understand that attention is a place, what that will look like is what Rob said, which is that you're no longer looking for a there. You know that you're here.
Yes.
Like that's kind of the result. So like if you can master this thing, this is what it will look like, and it will profoundly change your experience with what's going on around you. And the hack there to kind of like throw the happiness part in, right? If you can do that, then anything else that you're doing externally, whether that's having a glass of wine, making a ton of money in your business, hanging out with your friends, walking down the hallway, all the other stuff then that you have brought into here becomes like exponentially better.
Yeah.
And so when Rob's like, oh, you can experience joy from walking around, you know, down the hallway, you can, because it's not that anything that you're doing outside is giving you joy. It's that the joy that you have found is omitting out.
Yes.
Right. And it changes your experience with everything, which is why like, oh, it sounds like, oh, just change your attention. But really like that will make an incredible difference in your daily experience of life, good or bad or better. And so,
yeah. And your ability to hang out in the experience of it makes all those other things even better. And
right.
You notice when they're bad. So my favorite example of this is like when we're hanging out with friends and we're really having this joyous experience. So often our brain wants to hold on to that. So it immediately goes to like, oh my God, we got to keep doing this. Like, how can I keep doing this? And we're trying to make permanent this thing that's not permanent, right? We're trying to make this experience of laughing with our friends permanent. So we immediately like stop the laughing. We give up on the feeling of joy in that moment and we go, hey guys, we got to do this more. Could we do this like once a month or whatever? Before you know it, you're like into scheduling and thinking about it and doing all this. And before you realize it, like you've kind of squashed the joy that was there. Whereas if you just known that, oh, I'm having so much joy, let me just sit and be grateful for this. Let me just like really see how much I can feel into this. It's still going to pass. You're going to go home. You can plan later to do it again. That's fantastic. But that quality of like wanting it all the time or trying to cling to it, like, oh, here's a neat moment. What happens is all the moments are neat. So you can leave that thing, get into a cab with a cab driver and have this like ridiculously amazing experience with like a stranger while you feel really full from like how much fun you had with your friends. And then, you know, and on and on and on it goes, because you're remaining in the space of like really sourcing the joy that's just coming from, you know, the divinity of being alive, right? The fact that this is like coming up constantly. And then you can get out and notice that there's this moon and just be like in this whole other context of like, oh my God, like how beautiful is the sky right now? And then you can walk inside and do that, you know, so you can stack these, but the normal response is that that night was good. It was good because I was with my friends and they were fun and we had all this time. So I better plan on doing that a ton more because I need more of that in my life. And it's like, actually, no, like you could have had this joyous experience by yourself at that place, just hanging with strangers or talking to nobody, because that's not where it came from. However, when it does come, you'll be able to just be like, this is amazing, right? This literally leads to better sex. This leads to better friendships. This leads to better everything, because you're not like a crack addict trying to grab and hold and get all the joy that you can and be all scared when it's going to go away, because it's this endless thing that's available to you.
Well, your attention is really in a here,
yes,
and not a there. And I mean, I love that story. And since I heard that story right when I kind of met Rob, he's told that, and since then I apply that story because it is one of my favorites. Because you're like, no, I'm hanging with my friends. Like, of course I want to replicate that. And I have really good two couples that are really good friends of mine, live in a different state, but have been around for like big events before we lived far apart. So like, you know, I married them and helped them move into their houses, just like really, really good friends. And I'm at the point in my life where I can see them, like, if I'm lucky, once or twice a year. And when that first started happening, it would be like, okay, here's when we're gonna get together. You know, we're all busy. We live far away. You know, you have kids now and jobs and stuff like that. So let's plan the next time that we're gonna. And I noticed kind of as the more I hear that story, and I'm always reminded, like, I don't do that anymore. And I thought, and you know, old me or you know, less actualized me is like, well, if we don't plan it, it won't happen, and I'll never see my friends, and I'll never have these great experiences. And is this the last one? If it's the last one, we should treat it special. And it's like all this
and look
noise
at where your
in my head.
Look at where your attention
and I
goes to lack,
and I missed it.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, you know, when there's opportunities, we seize them. We get together. We got together like really recently. It was super fun. But just kind of reiterate back to like, attention is a place. By being present in those moments when they're happening, you get the treasure trove of those memories. Because I wasn't lost in thought and trying to be out of it, I was really deeply in the experience with them. I can then move my attention now when they're not here and we're not, you know, I don't know when I'm going to see them again. I can move my attention into this like really present moment, like a memory, like attention to past is present. That's all place in your head, which I don't think that I would have if in my head during the time I was with them, I was ruminating. So it really is this like, I've had fun kind of playing with the layers of my own kind of mind and thinking when I'm with my friends who we don't see often, just with that exact story in mind.
Yeah.
And it really does change what's already an amazing experience no matter what. And it makes it better. And so this whole idea, I'm circling back to when I said, you know, I challenge anyone that says they can't be happier, because there's ways to kind of grow, even if everything is going well, right?
Yes.
You have the money and the job and the partner and the friends. There's ways to just like dig in and like really mine more kind of joy for yourself, richness, and not this, richness. And this is this wonderful thing where you can carry it kind of with you and kind of fill up on it almost, you know, in such a wonderful way. And again, I hope by now people who have listened to us ramble for this long are not thinking that we're talking about a piece of cake or, you know, a glass of wine.
No,
we're talking about
this, like,
talking
rich
about
running your
happiness.
mind. We're talking about running your mind very differently. And apparently an anti-planning strategy. No, this is not anti-planning. Planning is fine. But no, Sarah just nailed that. I mean, that's exactly right. And that's what comes. This is a way to run your mind completely differently so that you're not looking outside yourself for happiness, but you're capable of sourcing it. The two things I want to do before we wrap this up. One, I want to tell kind of what we're going to intend to move into in the next couple of podcasts, at least. What we're talking about here in this, show is a conscious mastery of your conscious mind, right? Gaining the ability to notice where your attention is, what you're conscious of, what's going on there, and when you master that, you end up with a very different ability to, hack happy for yourself, or to create happiness for yourself, or connect with joy and peace and calm and all that. What happens though is, if you're in a situation where your external world is continually bothering you, right? Even if you're a master at this, it's still going to be more difficult, because you're going to have, let's say, an abusive partner, or an unsafe living environment, or addiction all around you, or something. It's going to be difficult. And so just mastering this is absolutely the place to start. No question. Like, this is 100%, you need this first. But then it would make sense to change maybe some of these external things, right? Like if there's dysfunction around you, because you're just going to be invited back into negative all the time, and you're going to have to do this fight with your attention because of that, right? So there's this external stuff that can do that. The other thing, which if anybody's been listening to me forever, what I talk about quite a bit is what's going on in your unconscious, right? You also have these patterns that you've taken on from when you were a child, from things you've survived, different, traumatic or difficult things you've been through, that give us ways of thinking that are kind of outside of our consciousness. And if some of those patterns are going on, again, you can still master your happiness. When they happen, you can address them and move your attention and still do better. But if your brain is set up in a way where it's serving up this unconscious stuff all the time, that's really difficult to deal with, like I'm not enough, or I don't deserve money, or nobody likes me, or whatever those things are that are patterns that often feel like truth to us. They're outside of our conscious awareness. We want to address that too. So I'm hoping over the next couple talks, at least, we can address both what do we do with that unconscious stuff? How do we address some of that? And then also, what do we do with this external stuff? And is there immediate stuff to do? Does that take time? Like, how do we fix those things? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be a really great set of episodes. And I promise you, it is easier than it sounds, right?
It really is. Yeah.
I mean, that whole conversation that we just had around attention, it's really like, where's your attention and can you move it? And that's like the 2-sentence summary.
And do you know how to move it? And I think that goes into the other thing I want to do, which was talk just for a second about the Hacking Happy program, because, what we created there is, if you just heard that and feel like you can do it, you're done, go do it. But the reality is that there's a series of steps to pattern making that natural for you and easy and obvious, like so that your brain can shift over and go, oh, I really get what my attention is. I now really understand what he means. I now know where to move it to. It's way easier to do, I can actually do it now, right, every time, and actually become happier. And that's what we really wanted to create for people, because the happier version of you is also probably going to be the more successful version of you. It's probably going to be the more popular version of you, right? The better version of you is going to show up into all the things that you want to do.
Definitely going to enjoy life more.
Yes, 100%. So you're going to be happier, and you're going to be, able to create more success, have more focus, be able to, we didn't even talk about focus, right? But like that, I mean, we did a little bit, but when I'm talking about your attention, I'm talking about, can you focus on a work task diligently in a way that impresses not only your peers, but you, right? Can you sit down for 90 minutes and not let your attention move? I didn't used to be capable of that at all. I'm very capable of that now. So there's a shift in.
I'm barely capable of that. I'm a mental newbie.
You're still impressive on human scale. I love, you're amazing actually. But this will make you more productive, right? This will make you run your mind and your life at a different level. And it all starts with this mastery of attention and understanding how to shift your state immediately, et cetera. So if anybody's interested, please go to hackinghappy.com, check out that program. We made it incredibly affordable. And I think it's the first step for anybody that wants to begin working on any of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I legitimately would buy it if I had not already gone through it, everything. And let me tell you, as someone who has gone through all of it, it's easy. It is powerful. It's affordable. And like, I also really highly recommend you checking this out, because I like I said, I operate under the assumption that everybody can be just a little bit happier.
Yeah.
And this is it's not complicated. So, yeah, just definitely
simple.
Check it out.
Every day it's every day it's a, either like, 3 or 4 to probably 10 or 12 minute audio. And there's a little bit of a practice that I suggest you might try if you want to, that can be 1 to 5 minutes a day. So it's literally something you could do in 15 minutes in total a day. It takes 21 days. you will be happier in under 3 weeks. You'll be happier much sooner than that, but you'll really understand what we're doing by the end of 21 days. And yeah, go check it out.
All right. That's pretty much all I got.
All right. Deep bow. Thank you so much.
All right.